In this series, I will be finding all the history of the character related to the game. First up is Ryu. Let's get into it. Ryu lost his parents when he was a very young boy and had no idea if they were still alive. A man named Guken found Ryu and took him in, raising him in his remote dojo and instructing him in the ways of his martial arts. Ryu once observed Guken, Gutetsu, and Akuma training out with each other. Later on, Guken would train Ken Masters, the spoilt son of his closest friend. Ken provided Ryu with a companion who was a boy his own age in addition to being a sparring partner. To this day, Ryu still views Ken as his best friend and adopted brother despite Ryu once looking up to Guken as a father figure. Guken thought Ryu was prepared to tour the world at the age of 23 to test and perfect his martial arts prowess against the top warriors from all around the world. Ken casually asks of Ryu which of the two will become the most well-known martial artist first following the conclusion of their training. In order to take on Saget, the emperor of Muay Thai, which is thought to be the strongest martial art, Ryu travels to Thailand by himself while Ken flies to the United States. When Ryu first arrived in Thailand, he realized he couldn't just confront Saget as an unproven fighter, so Ryu devised a strategy to force Saget to accept his challenge. He felt that by dominating several Muay Thai opponents, Saget would ultimately hear about it. If successful, Saget will come out to protect Muay Thai's reputation. Saget heard Ryu and his fighting spirit burnt after he defeated 20 Muay Thai practitioners and yelled at the fighters about how it is embarrassing to let a stranger damage Muay Thai's reputation. He assured Ryu that they would fight once he demonstrated authentic Muay Thai. Nevertheless, Saget is defeated by Ryu with an almost deadly shoryuken that leaves a significant scar on Saget's chest in addition to rendering him comatose. Saget vows revenge on Ryu after regaining consciousness and realizing what had transpired. After leaving Saget behind, Ryu discovers the body of Guken and buries him in an unmarked grave, promising to visit and defeat the man responsible. Ryu trains for several months while traveling to different locations and contemplating the purpose of everything in life. Saget was formerly regarded as the strongest man in the world, therefore Ryu's victory against him would make him the strongest. This would signify that Ryu had accomplished the main goal of his life. Ryu persisted in his training, picking up new skills along the way, since he refused to accept that he had already attained his objective so quickly. On the remote island of Gokwentu, he challenges Akuma and engages him in combat. Ryu eventually won the fierce fight, but in reality, Akuma was just trying to test him. Akuma regains his calm and realizes Ryu possesses similar abilities to himself. He then continues to teach Ryu about the Satsui no Hado, a force that consumes those who practice their shared fighting method and compels them to succeed even if it means murdering the rival. After instructing Ryu to seek him out once he has embraced the Satsui no Hado, Akuma strikes the ground with a devastating blow and vanishes. Ryu is left in the water to reflect on Akuma's words while the island collapses around him. Ken discovers Ryu a few months after Ryu leaves the island. Ryu asks Ken what it entails to be a true fighter and questions whether he ought to utilize the same fist he employed to defeat Saget or the one that murderer Akuma employs. In an effort to wake him up, Ken confronts Ryu when he returns to his poor habit of overanalyzing situations. Ken discovers after overcoming Ryu that he has been terribly troubled ever since his previous triumph over Saget. He hands Ryu his red hairband and tells him to use it as a remembrance of their struggle and to keep fighting in order to discover the answer anytime he feels lost. He also reminds Ryu to keep fighting in order to find the answer. They part ways as Ryu accepts the headband with joy. Soon later, Sakura, one of his followers, approaches and declares her wish to train with him. Ryu responds that he still has a lot to learn himself, but for the time being, he lets Sakura take a photo of him. At some point, Saget, who wants to settle a score, discovers Ryu. Saget insists despite Ryu's denials that he hasn't fully recovered from their previous fight. Saget flees when Ryu concedes defeat rather than cause any more harm. Ryu resisted, promising to fight him again, and Saget only realizes this later, after some thought. Sometime later, Honda meets Ryu and has a sparring match with him. Then Bison dispatches Junie, another doll, to acquire information about Ryu. Ryu becomes enraged as Bison employs a hypnotized Ken to draw him out of hiding. In addition to his interaction with Rose, who has close ties to Bison, Ryu is still worried by what Akuma had told him. She explains to him that in order to overcome Bison, he must sacrifice his soul in the battle. When Ryu arrives, Bison forces Ken to battle Ryu. Ryu triumphs and frees Ken from Bison's mind control. As expected, despite putting up a heroic fight, Ryu is vanquished when he faces Bison. Ryu, who is only partially conscious, is taken by Bison, who uses the knowledge that the Satsui no Hado, the evil power Ryu strives to avoid utilizing, is similar to Bison's own psycho power to start brainwashing him. This scene is cut short by the arrival of Saget, Ken, and Sakura, each of whom has followed Ryu for different reasons. While Ken and Sakura distract Bison, Saget confronts the brainwashed Ryu, instantly recognizing the effects of Bison's brainwashing. Ryu comes to his senses and confronts Bison at Saget's prodding. Bison detects Ryu's dark power, which he refers to as the greatest form of psycho power, and seeks to control Ryu's psyche once more. Despite the encouragement of his teammates, Ryu refuses and beats Bison with a strong Metsu Shoryuken, temporarily destroying him. Chun-Li noticed a little girl fleeing with several others, who turned out to be Cammy, and she tracked down Ryu and fled with him. Ken is thrilled to be seeing his old pal. The two part ways with the promise of a new duel. Saget informs Ryu that the corruption nearly ruined him and that he is not yet ready to face him again. Ryu then departs Saget, pledging to return once he has achieved ultimate mastery. Saget learns that he must defeat Ryu not for vengeance, but for his own survival. Ryu informed Sakura that he was not yet ready to train her or fight a rematch with her, citing the fact that he still had a lot to learn. Sakura understands, and the two make a pact to meet again someday, with Ryu walking away and Sakura watching him go. A few months later, Ryu wins yet another village combat competition while travels around Asia in search of fresh challenges. "Marry my daughter," exclaims the leader of the village. Ryu becomes paralyzed. He declines and continues on his way. He comes to a halt for a moment to observe the children sparingly. Seeing these young guys reminded Ryu of his own youth, when he spent every day practicing alongside Ken. Ryu sends Ken a letter that rekindles his fighting spirit. Ryu travels to America to meet Ken at a hamburger shop, but is caught up in the Chun-Li Shadaloo feud. Ryu leaves Chun-Li and runs into Ken. They both hear about the inaugural World Warrior Tournament. Ryu enters the World Warrior Tournament to test his skills and defeats many of the new warriors, with Ken and Saget amongst them. Unbeknownst to Ryu, the tournament was organized by Shadaloo with the sole intent on retrieving his body. As Ryu prepared to face Bison, Bison is suddenly attacked. Ryu, avoiding Bison's flaming remnants after his body was destroyed, discovered it was Akuma's doing. Ryu and Akuma would duel, with Akuma dominating the fight. As he rebukes Ryu about his rejection of the Dark Hado, Ryu finds the strength to recover and fight back. However, Ken would interrupt the fight, forcing Akuma to leave. Ryu continued his travels after the World Warrior contest and ended up in an isolated desert where he practiced. Ryu recalls his confrontation with Akuma, during which Akuma urged Ryu to give in to the Dark Hado or else he would murder him. Ryu then leaves the desert and goes to a bar where he meets a biker. The biker then tells him about an American martial arts champion who deserted his family. Ryu goes to the champion's house, believing it to be Ken, but is ambushed by Viper. The Delta Red agent Cammy then makes an attempt to surprise Viper. Cammy, on the other hand, was no match for Viper, and when Viper tortured Cammy, the Dark Hado took control of Ryu and confronted Viper, whom she would easily beat. Fortunately for Viper, she is able to get away from the possessed Ryu. After killing several S.I.N scientists who observed the altercation out of rage, Ryu is subsequently saved by Ken, Chun-Li, Guile, and Sakura, who also assist Cammy. Then, when Ken contacts the hospital to assist Cammy, Sakura would detain the possessed Ryu. Then Ryu would awaken and become aware of what he had done. Ryu discovers he is being pursued by S.I.N and its leader Seth after being transported to Ken's house and learning about their nefarious plans. Ryu decides to go through with Guile's plan to enter Seth's cruise ship and imprison him, even though he is aware that Seth would be there to meet him. After arriving at the base, Ryu and Ken take care of a number of S.I.N goons before Ryu runs into Seth. Then Ryu and Seth start to fight, with Seth easily defeating Ryu and imparting to him his perverted view of power. But after claiming that the power Seth portrays is not what he seeks, Ryu acknowledges that he has never understood what power is and that he is aware of Seth's philosophical viewpoint. Unamused, Seth keeps pounding Ryu up until Ryu wakes a new power and uses it to almost murder Seth. Ryu eventually passes out from this strength, and Ken feels it. The two then part ways, with Ryu promising to see Ken again after a few days. Next, Ryu participates in a new tournament to hone his abilities and meet up with his lifelong friend Ken for another bout. He meets Sakura along the way, whom he exhorts to work out more. In the meantime, Ryu runs across Saget once more. The two engage in combat. The outcome is uncertain, although it seems that Ryu prevailed. Ryu, who is determined to halt her participation in the competition because he believes he is the last hope, confronts her while she is taking part in it. This leads to a conflict that both parties enter reluctantly. He defeats the tournament's host Seth, who is actually a duplicate of him, in the championship match at the S.I.N headquarters. Flames were put out by Sakura and Ryu's Hadokens before they could reach Blanka and Dan. The Satsui no Hado, a weapon of mass destruction created by S.N that harnessed the energy in the human body, was used by Ryu to attack the Bleach machine during and after the battle, causing the structure to collapse around them. In the midst of this, Sakura, who has been looking for Ryu, discovers him with the Bleach device. A pulse of electricity from it then sends her crashing into a wall. Ryu uses a Shoryuken to attack the machine to save her, and they both exit the facility with the weapon destroyed. At some point, Ryu confronts Guken and engages in combat with him as the Satsui no Hado attempts to take control of him. The Satsui no Hado is sealed by Guken using the power of nothingness, rendering Ryu unconscious. Guken had actually survived his last battle with Akuma when he encountered Ryu. Then Akuma appears to challenge his brother to a death duel, with the winner claiming the cub, meaning Ryu. Although the result of the combat is unknown, it is highly likely that Guken won or that it was a tie because Ryu is subsequently seen without Dark Hado's control. Later, Ryu and Ken pursue their long-lost teacher along a rock wall, with Ryu wishing him well and Ken pleading with Guken to stay. Then, as Ryu and Ken's Jeep pass by, he is left pulling Rufus' motorcycle as it breaks down as he and Ken are trekking across the desert while Rufus mocks them on his motorcycle. At some point, Ryu runs into Sakura and bids her goodbye as she, Dan, and Blanka board a cruise ship bound for home. Later, after concluding that his battles had strengthened him, he runs across an older Sakura. He meets Guken and starts training with him once more with the Satsui no Hado still on his mind. In his dream, he is fighting against his evil self, claiming to him that the power to kill will make him stronger, which Ryu ultimately rejects it. Guken is in a sparring match during the incident. Ryu charges himself in the Satsui no Hado and attempts to hit his master with a single Hadouken. It explodes in a flash of light. Ryu wakes up from his dream with Guken telling him that the Satsui no Hado almost consumed him. Rashid and Azam find Ryu, introducing himself as a hero who travels the world. Guken questions Rashid why he comes to see Ryu. Rashid states he wants to challenge Ryu in a match, which is to test his mettle. Ryu doesn't immediately get up to fight, worrying about the Satsui no Hado, which confuses Rashid and has Guken questioning him why he didn't do it, citing Ryu's quote, "The answer lies in the heart of battle." Ryu eventually gets up and spars with Rashid, resulting in a victory. Rashid learns from the fight about himself. He thanks Ryu for the lesson and leaves. Ryu decides that he should leave, too, and better understand his power. Guken tells Ryu to meet Ken, who has been concerned about him. Ryu and Ken finally meet in Brazil. Ken was told by Guken about Ryu's struggles with the Satsui no Hado and thinks a good match can solve it, so they fight. Afterwards, Ryu still worries about the Satsui no Hado. Ken reassures Ryu that if Ryu falls over to the dark side, he'll take him down and stop it. Ken tells Ryu to just relax and fight. Not long after, Ryu was challenged by Laura, who is seeking to fight worthy opponents, and became thrilled about the Satsui no Hado he utilizes in the fight. Ryu goes to China and gets ambushed by a Shadaloo soldier. Nash comes in and takes down the soldier. Nash expected to see Ryu, which triggers a bit of Satsui no Hado within him. Nash says they have to fight so he can understand the power and know its limits. The fight ultimately ends in a draw. Nash is surprised by the power, having it surpass his expectations. Ryu tells him that he tries to suppress the power and struggles with it, but has decided to not let it take him over, which Nash respects. Ryu thanks him for the fight and Nash leaves. Sometime after, Ryu is meditating by a waterfall and is visited by Ken, who tells him of the events that have taken place. After getting defeated in a sparring match to Ken, Ryu tells him that he will join them when his training is complete. Ryu meets with Dalsum, training Mahesh, and says he is still struggling with the Satsui no Hado and needs help. They decide to have a spar. After the spar, Dalsum tells him that suppressing the power will eventually lead to the power consuming him. He tells him that he needs to face the Hado and conquer it. Nikali drops down from above, looking to consume fighters' souls. Dalsum defends Mahesh while Ryu fights Nikali. Nikali overpowers Ryu, which almost triggers his dark power. Dalsum takes Ryu's punch, proclaiming that he can't let the Hado take him over. Dalsum fights off Nikali. Ryu notices a black moon veering over and blocking the sun, which gives him visions of M. Bison. Nikali eventually melts away temporarily. He is told about Nikali by Dalsum, telling him that Nikali is an ancient being that consumes warriors' souls and only appears when many warriors are needed in a crisis. Ryu concludes that the world is in crisis because of the black moons. Not long after, Ryu notices a presence and looks to the Kanzuki estate rooftop, where Nikali has managed to get to. He savagely attacks him, but Ryu dodges and Nikali lands on the ground. Nikali transforms into his monstrous state, trying to devour Ryu's soul, but Ryu manages to dodge his attack. Ryu unleashes the full extent of his powers of the Satsui no Hado and the power of nothingness, entering the state of Hado Kakusei. In a desperate attempt, Nikali attacks him and Ryu manages to punch him through the chest, resulting in Nikali reverting back to his normal state. Nikali asks himself why he couldn't devour Ryu's soul. Dalsum arrives and tells Nikali that Ryu's soul will not be devoured, as he no longer struggles with the Satsui no Hado internally. Having failed to devour Ryu, Dalsum, M. Bison, or Charlie, Nikali finally dissipates into the ground. Ryu, now knowing that his struggle is gone, he leaves to meet up with Ken and the others. Ryu finally joins up with Ken, Chun-Li, and Karen as they team up to make a final assault against Shadaloo. As Chun-Li defeats Fang while rescuing Li Fun, Ryu finally faces off against Bison, who is ready to challenge him, and Ryu states that his strength was to push forward and he is ready to fight him. After an epic long battle, Bison isn't giving up yet until Ryu hits him with a Hadouken, infused with the power of nothingness, seemingly hinting at Ryu's mastery of the power and a sublimation of the Satsui no Hado. Bison's body begins to crack as it dissipates in a flash of light, defeating the madman. As the base is about to destroyed, Ryu, Guile, Chun-Li, and Li Fun escape. Chun-Li is slow to catch up, so Ryu uses his Denjin Hadouken to stop the fires from the explosion. After the incident, Ryu is meditating as Ken visits him for the second time. He challenges him for a friendly sparring match as he tells Ryu to prove if he already found his answer. Ryu is able to defeat Ken as Ken also manages to knock Ryu's red headband. As it falls on the ground, Ryu realizes that he already found the answer to his true strength. As he gets his headband, Ken is happy to see his friend has grown, and Ryu also says that he still needs his headband for the battle. The two are later seen having a friendly fist bump with each other. Not long after, Ryu receives a message from Karen that Sakura was troubled about her life and her future. He decides to go and pay her a visit. After a fight to ease Sakura's mind, Ryu praises her for growing stronger and more mature. Sakura asks Ryu about his life, stating that no matter how strong he becomes, he will eventually grow old and die, wondering if that's the right life for him. Ryu asks if she means he should take on a disciple to carry on his skills to the next generation, stating that he is still in training and can't take one. Sakura says she meant having children in the future to create new bonds in life. Ryu replies that he never thought of it, but considers it another type of strength. Sakura agrees and thanks Ryu for his answer, now knowing what she wants in life. Ryu takes his leave to continue his journey and training. Sometime later, Ryu is found by Akuma and the two prepare to battle in a Satsui no Heido versus Muno-ken clash. Akuma defeats Ryu in battle, but does not kill him. Instead, he questions if there is no one that can match him. Ryu, smiling while laying on the ground, asks questions to Akuma, claiming that his fists will continue to communicate with Akuma on opposite ends. Akuma then flees, letting fate determine when those two will meet again. Ryu eventually gets up and continues his quest, knowing he still needs to get stronger. Arriving in Japan, Ryu prepares to clean and relax at a bathhouse. Honda attempts to teach some of the guests, specifically Laura, Rashid, and Ryu, in his bathhouse the proper manners after taking a bath. Not long after, Ryu is shown meditating at a dojo in the middle of a storm, with the only source of light coming from a lit candle. As the storm grows stronger and lightning begins to flash, Ryu's shadow on the wall caused by the candle takes the shape and form of Kage, urging Ryu to give in to the Satsui no Hado, and claims that, without it, Ryu is nothing but an empty shell. Kage materializes and leaves to prove his point. Kage returns to see that Ryu has no worry or has moved from his position. Kage then angrily insults Ryu and forcibly attempts to corrupt him. Ryu replies that although he would not deny Kage's existence, he cannot accept that they are one and the same, and that he, Ryu, wouldn't be fighting back. The two fight at the top of Suzaku Castle, with Ryu claiming that he isn't fighting to win, but that he isn't fighting to lose either. After Kage beats Ryu and mocks Ryu one last time, Ryu dismisses it and says Kage can do whatever it wants. If it wants to corrupt Ryu, then it may. If it wants to leave, then it may leave. Kage is distraught and confused, asking why Ryu isn't afraid. Kage then vanishes, as Ryu is no longer affected by the influence of the Satsui no Heido, having nullified and overcome the Satsui no Heido by tapping into the power of nothingness. Ryu, who is currently 33 years old, keeps up his daily travels in an effort to develop into a true martial artist. After a long absence from home in Japan, where their relationship has soured because Ken is now a father, he is called to a hot spring in where Ken wants to meet him and introduce him to his new student. Later, Ryu, Ken, and Sean watch Hagen and Zangief compete for the WWCA Championship. After being struck by Zangief's double lariat, Hagen rampaged as he made his way back to the ring, picking up a chair and throwing it at a spectator. Ryu blocked the chair, then Sean knocked him out to protect the spectators. Ryu enters the World Warrior Tournament to further advance his fighting abilities. Ryu loses to Oro and leaves to hone his skills more. Ryu later fights against Sean, who has been asked by Ken to fight him. Ryu easily defeats him from time to time with just a single Hadouken as he noticed his actions. A year later, Ryu and Ken engage in a friendly match, with Ryu coming out on top. He eventually runs into Alex, whom he soundly defeats. Ryu exhorts the novice wrestler to keep developing his skills against formidable opposition. Alex immediately sets out to find Ryu for a rematch because he is fascinated by his talent and driven to get stronger. In order to continue his training, Ryu journeys to a rocky area, but he is ignorant of Oro's presence because he has only heard his voice. Later, Makoto runs into Ryu and challenges him to improve the reputation of her dojo. After her confrontation with Ryu, her dojo receives a flood of new students as a result of the attention. Ryu returns to the waterfall where he was honing his mind and body after the fight. He murmurs about what a true warrior is, why he must be strong, and remembers his younger years. He is covered by a single leaf, which he smashes with his left hand. Ryu vows to continue fighting because he thinks that as long as his tough opponents and certain intense clashes thrill him, he will have the strength to move even one finger. Ryu then gets up to continue the fight and challenge new and stronger warriors. Years later, Ryu is still ever training and seeks true strength. Ryu travels the globe in search of worthy opponents. Having overcome the Satsui no Hado, he now seeks yet greater heights. And that is the full story of Ryu from Street Fighter to Street Fighter 6, with the info I could find related to the game's canon. His story will continue in Street Fighter 6, and you know I will be playing and watching it. Until next time, warriors.